Good afternoon. It is both a blessing and an honor to stand before you on this Juneteenth, a day that calls us to do more than celebrate freedom. It calls us to remember, to reflect, to honor those who endured, those who persevered, and those who never stopped believing that a better day would come. I want to thank the Orange County African American Historical Society for inviting me to share a part of my story. A story rooted deep in Orange County, Virginia, the home of James Madison, the father of our Constitution. It is a story shaped by struggle, strengthened by community, and sustained by faith. I was born in 1954, and I lived in a freedmen's village about 4 miles from where I'm standing. It was during the final years of the Jim Crow era. I belong to one of the last generations that can say, not from a textbook, but from personal experience, what it was like to live under legalized segregation. For many people, segregation feels like ancient history. For me, it was childhood. As our nation approaches its 250th anniversary, it is important to remember something often overlooked. While America is nearly 250 years old, the full promise of freedom and opportunity for African Americans is much younger. The struggle to secure equal access to education, housing, employment, voting rights, and public accommodations has unfolded within the lifetime of people that are still living today. That perspective is what makes Juneteenth so meaningful. Juneteenth is not simply a celebration of freedom delayed. It is a celebration of courage, a celebration of perseverance, a celebration of generations who continued moving forward through slavery, through Reconstruction, through Jim Crow, and the long pursuit of equal opportunity. The story of African Americans did not begin with freedom. It began with unimaginable hardship. Families were separated, labor was stolen. Human beings were bought and sold as property. Yet, under these circumstances, our ancestors held tightly to faith, family, dignity, and hope. Though many of these names have been lost to history, their strength lives on in each of us. That is why preserving history is so important. Every photograph saved, every document uncovered, every oral history recorded, and every cemetery preserved restores a voice that someone once tried to silence. Following emancipation came Reconstruction, a brief but remarkable period when formerly slave people glimpsed the possibility of full citizenship. Here in Orange County, between 15 and 20 freedmen's communities emerged within just a few years of freedom. Families purchased land, built homes, organized churches, established schools, created businesses. They were not waiting for opportunity to arrive. They were creating opportunity for themselves and future generations. Though scattered across the county, these communities were connected through family, faith, education, and mutual support. They understood a lesson that remains true today. When people work together, they can overcome extraordinary obstacles. Many people may not realize that where we are gathered today is on land that once was part of one of those historic African American communities. Think about that for a moment. This very ground beneath our feet carries the stories of families who endured slavery, celebrated freedom, survived segregation, and helped build Orange County the way we know it today. But the promise of Reconstruction was eventually replaced by the reality of Jim Crow. By the time I was born, segregation shaped nearly every aspect of daily life. Black families were restricted to where they could live. Opportunities were limited not only by law, but also by custom and discrimination. Separate schools existed throughout Orange County. Many were built by black communities itself or operated in private homes. Before consolidation into Prospect Heights and Lightfoot Elementary School, 13 separate schools served African American children across the county. Black high school students were bused to Culpeper County, to Carver Regional High School. It served Orange, Madison, Culpeper, and Rappahannock counties. There was no preschool, no kindergarten. You simply started school when the time came. Restaurants would not serve us food, but many would not. They would serve us food, but many would not allow us to eat inside of the establishment. Public swimming pools, beaches, tennis courts, recreation centers, and many other facilities were off limits to African Americans. Our basketball court may be nothing more than a metal hoop nailed to a tree. Yet, we found ways to create joy. Black baseball teams were organized and played throughout the county. On Sunday afternoons, games brought the entire communities together. Families gathered, neighbors visited, and for a few hours, the burdens of everyday life seemed lighter. I remember my grandfather. He worked as a butler at the Blair House in Washington, D.C. Every Friday, we would pick him up right at the Orange train station. Sometimes we would stop at the Tasty Freeze for ice cream. We would not go inside. We could not go inside. But we had to order from the side window, and then we had to eat outside. Then we would take him back to the train station on Sunday evening, where he had to wait in the colored waiting room of the depot until it was time for him to get on board. At that time, it felt normal. Today, it reminds me of how deeply segregation touched even the smallest moments of everyday life. The Orange of my childhood would almost be unrecognizable to some people today. There were no traffic lights. There was no Route 15 bypass. The Route 15 from Orange to Gordonsville was 2 lanes. Main Street was a center of commerce, lined with department stores and parking meters. Madison Road had very little development. There was a dealership in town for all models of automobiles. And the President Madison Inn, it was active, with bellhops unloading luggage from visitors staying in town overnight. The area where we stand today was considered the black section of town. It was home to business, churches, family, and community leaders who supported one another despite limited opportunities. Many African American families were displaced when the bypass was built. They built community not because circumstances were easy, but because community was necessary. Then, little by little, things began to change. Sometimes change arrived through major events. Sometimes it arrived through something as simple as sharing a meal. In 1967, I entered the 7th grade and became part of the first generation to integrate Orange County school system. It was a newly created intermediate school located on Bellevue Avenue. That same era saw businesses begin to open their doors to everyone. Drug Fair opened, a lunch counter, where all customers were welcome. For 25 cents, you could buy a hamburger, fries, and a drink. And this may not sound revolutionary today, but at the time, it represented something much larger than a meal. It represented inclusion. Horse Feathers Restaurant, another place where young people from different backgrounds gathered together. Friendships formed. Misconceptions faded. Barriers slowly began to fade. Often real change begins when people simply get to know one another. Secondary education was also not easily acceptable. Many colleges excluded African Americans entirely or severely limited their enrollment. UVA was an all-white male college when I was growing up. Families sacrificed tremendously to give their children opportunity they themselves never had. They understood that education could open doors that prejudice tried to keep closed. And over time, these doors began to open. During my lifetime, I have witnessed tremendous change. I have seen schools integrate. I have seen voting rights expanded. I have seen businesses open opportunities that once seemed impossible. I have seen barriers fall that many believed would never come down. The progress was not quick. It was not easy, but it happened. As we approach America's 250th anniversary, we should always remember the African American men and women of Orange County who served our nation. Some by choice, many through the draft. Many answered this country's call while still being denied full equality at home. I know something about that. I enlisted in the United States Air Force in 1974. For the first time in my life, I experienced something that I had rarely seen before. It was equal opportunity and treatment. And I learned about Black history and Black heroes. Today, we honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice. We honor those who returned home and built businesses, churches, and community. And we honor those who came home carrying wounds, both visible and invisible, while at the same time they helped to move this nation forward. Their country is part of the American story. As we celebrate Juneteenth and prepare for America's 250th anniversary, let us remember this. Freedom is more than an historical event. It is the responsibility to remember. The responsibility to preserve, the responsibility to build. We honor those who survived slavery. We honor those who built communities during Reconstruction. We honor those who endured segregation. We honor those who served the nation that did not always extend to them the rights they defended. And we honor those who persevered these stories so future generations would know the truth. My generation witnessed extraordinary change within a single lifetime. We traveled from segregated schools to integrated classrooms, from separate waiting rooms to equal access, from limited opportunities to possibilities our grandparents could scarcely imagine. The question for future generations is not whether progress has been made. The question is what they will do with the opportunities they have inherited. Will they remember the sacrifices that made those opportunities possible? Will they preserve the stories of those who came before them? Will they continue to work of the building a nation that more fully reflects its highest ideals? That responsibility now belongs to them. And one day, it will be their time to tell the story. Happy Juneteenth, and thank you all.